What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel. We are joined by Daniel Starkin. Daniel, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Excited for some baseball news to start coming in. The winter meetings, I guess, the winter meetings, the virtual winter meetings, whatever you want to call them, is starting this week. So maybe we'll get something fun this week.
Well, I mean, speaking of, Brandon Johnson in the chat mentions it. I literally just got a text. Lance Lynn traded to the White
Yeah, I
Sox.
saw that too. I literally just saw that right as we were
So,
recording.
there's your news. There's your news. I don't know any details. Was there any details connected to it that you saw?
I saw like Dane Dunning. Here, just passing. Dane Dunning is headed back. He's a pitching. I think
Prospect.
he's still considered a prospect. He came up this past year, made a few starts, but yeah, he's a young pitcher.
Okay. Well, there you go. There you go. Yeah, as you said, I mean, it's so funny to be looking at like the NBA and how things work there. Free agency
Yeah,
starts
right.
and it's like 4 days before it, they've got sign and trades. Baseball free agency. I don't know if anybody knows this. It started about a month and a half ago, it feels like, and like literally nothing has happened. So we'll see. But yeah, hopefully some things start to pick up and things keep moving in the right direction. But hey, we appreciate you if you're joining us on YouTube, if you're joining us on Facebook, if you're joining us on Periscope or Twitter. Thank you. It's going to be a good one tonight. If you missed last week, we did our first live one of these where we broke down the Dodgers infield. Tonight, we are moving to the outfield, which might seem like a little more boring of a topic in some ways because you might think, well, I mean, how complicated is it? You've got Mookie, you've got Cody Bellinger, but I really do think that there's a lot to talk about in the outfield. And so we're going to do that. And then at the end of the night, we're going to get to some questions if you've got them. So I loved it. I logged on and the first comment I got was trade Kenley Jansen. So who knows? We might have some exciting things to talk about as we get close. We are going to talk a little bit about the bullpen because I want to get Daniel's thoughts on Corey Knebel. Of course, I posted a video last week about Corey Knebel as well as some comments Dave Roberts made about Kenley Jansen. So we will get to that as we go. But before we dive into that, I want to focus our time on the or the outfield, excuse me. And as I was thinking about the outfield, there were kind of three big questions that jumped into my mind. The first one is, what do you do with left field? I think that's the biggest question mark, the biggest uncertainty out there. And related to that, the second question is, what do you do with Joc Pederson? This is a guy Dodger fans are very familiar with. I think most people assume he's going to be gone. He obviously hasn't signed anywhere yet. And so there's always the possibility that. And then third, which I think will be an interesting conversation, is about Cody Bellinger. This is a guy who we've seen the highs, but we've also seen the lows. We've seen inconsistency in the regular season and the postseason between year to year. And so just having an honest conversation about what really is fair to expect out of Cody Bellinger. And so we're going to do all that. But we'll start the same way we did with our infield overview with positions of stability. And we'll start in right field. We'll go right to left. Speaking of stability, there are no questions about who the Dodgers right fielder is next year.
Nope.
There are actually no questions about who the Dodgers right fielder will be for the next 10 years. That will be Mookie Betts. And there's not really a whole lot to talk about with Mookie. He's amazing. And so let me start with this question, Daniel. And I'd love to hear from some people in the chat. What was your reaction to watching Mookie Betts for the first time in 2020? And I mean, for the first time every day as a Dodger.
Right.
Did he exceed your expectations in 2020?
Yeah, I think he did, honestly. I mean, we obviously knew that he was a great player. Like, even if you don't watch the Red Sox every night, you know the name Mookie Betts. He won an MVP 2 years ago. He won the World Series that same year. So you know how good of a player he is, but we didn't exactly know like to what extent, like on a night in, night out basis, like the impact he makes on winning. So like, yeah, you could look at his stats and be like, yeah, he's, a perennial all-star. He's a top 5 player. But when you get to watch him night in and night out, you really get to see just how great he is in every facet of the game, really. Like, it's not just the hitting. It's not even like just the defense, which is better than I even thought it would be. It's the base running, it's the smart heads up plays that not too many guys would make. It's, just all of it, combined together makes him truly one of the best, probably two players in the sport right now. And, it's really fun to watch. And I can't wait. Like he said, he's probably going to be in right field for the next 10 years. So
yeah,
I can't wait for that.
Yeah, Adrian Lopez says better than I thought he was. General Jonic says unreal. A highlight play every day from Monster 7649. Absolutely. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I follow a lot about what's going on in the Dodgers world. I play fantasy baseball, so I kind of keep tabs. But Mookie Betts is one of those guys that if you're not actually watching him play, you miss it. Like, you can look at his box score, you can look at the WAR, you can look at all these things, and they will tell you how great he is. And yet, until you see it in person, like, because I'll admit, when they traded for him, I kept hearing, oh, it's one of the best 5 players in baseball. And I'm like, I mean, his stats are good. like his stats are good. And honestly, like, not to compare the two, but Francisco Lindor is probably the same type. When I hear about how amazing Lindor is, and then I look at his stats, I'm like, I mean, I don't know. He seems great, but not maybe like the most amazing ever. You see Mookie Betts play, and it's just unbelievable. The base running, the way he plays the outfield. I mean, even the little things like the way he fixed Austin Barnes. Somebody pointed out, Brandon Johnson, Joc called him the best defender he's ever seen. Any ball in the air, there's confidence that he's going to catch it. That's absolutely true. And oh, by the way, in 2020, he had his second best offensive season ever. He had 16 home runs. He was tied with AJ Pollock for the team lead. Mookie Betts was on pace for 47 home runs in 2020. His career high going into 2020 was 32. So in 60 games, 55 games probably, he was halfway to his career high. His OPS was 928. It's the second highest mark of his career. We know he's an elite fielder. He's won the Gold Glove, every year for I don't know how many years. He'll continue to win Gold Gloves, I'm sure. And by the way, he did it in the postseason. 871 OPS, 2 home runs, 6 stolen bases. So, I mean, he exceeded every expectation that I had by a long shot. And part of that was because I'll admit I had lower expectations than I probably should have. And maybe that's partly because we underestimate how hard it is to switch teams and just immediately succeed, especially with all the pressure of the contract that he had signed, the COVID year, all that. Mookie Betts was unbelievable. Harpazo 2020 says he's consistent, and we need that. He's a winner, and we've got it. And so for Mookie Betts, right field, pencil him in for the next decade, and we all get to feel great about it. And I mean, everything off the field too, right? Like, he's an amazing guy to root for. I mean, I will never forget just the passion after he catches that ball at the wall and does, runs in. After he hits the home run in Game 6 of the World Series. Like, those are the types of things that give me chills just thinking about it. And it's Mookie Betts at the middle of every single one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And real quick, just one thing you mentioned was the power. And to me, that was probably the thing I was most surprised about. Like, I didn't think he was a huge power guy. And
he might not be.
Yeah. I mean, we even had people like before the season saying like, oh, he's not playing, at Fenway anymore where they got the short left field fence. Like, he'll probably, his power numbers will dip, and they actually did the opposite.
Yeah.
And he, Dodger Stadium look just as small as Fenway, and he goes to all fields. So yeah, just an incredible player. And like you mentioned as well, an incredible human. He's already doing, great work in the community. And just the joy he plays with, it's so much fun to watch. So yeah. This is the perfect type of guy that you give that 12-year, $390 million deal to. Like, no offense to Manny Machado, but he's just not that guy for me. I don't even think Bryce Harper is necessarily that guy. These are just, a couple options that the Dodgers had the last few years. So I'm glad if they're going to give that type of contract to one guy, I'm glad it was Mookie for sure.
I love, Daniel, the no offense to Manny Machado, but like, it's like no offense to Manny Machado, but there's no way I'd trust that guy for 12 years. But no offense. I forget. Was it you were the no offense to the Padres guy, weren't you? Like, you called them a bootleg something, and you were like, well, no offense to them, but I forget what that was. It was during the postseason, but I remember giving you a hard time.
I forgot what it was.
I mean, I'm perfectly fine. I think I've said very offensive things to Manny Machado. So, I won't even say no offense. Like, yeah, I want nothing to do with Machado for 12 years. I feel great about Mookie Betts for the next 12 years. So we'll see. Well, hey, Monster7649 says we need to put Lux in left field. So hold on to that thought, because we're going to get to left field here in a moment. We've got one spot in between right and left, and that is center field. Cody Bellinger, another spot where there's no indecisiveness. Cody Bellinger is an everyday center fielder. He is an elite defensive player. The numbers may not make it. The numbers aren't sort of kind to Cody Bellinger, which is strange, but we all know what we see. But here's the thing that I want to ask you is, who's the real Cody Bellinger? And what I mean by that is, as I was going through his numbers, I want you to check out the 4 seasons that we've seen from Cody Bellinger, because it's an absolute roller coaster. His rookie year, OPS over 939 home runs. Oh my gosh, this guy's going to be a superstar. Second season, 813 OPS, 25 home runs. Okay, so good, not great. Third season.
Remember, that second season, he ended up being Platoon, too. So in the postseason, he was really only playable against righties.
Well, we're going to get to the postseason numbers. We're going to get there.
Yeah.
So The third season, he comes back, 1.10 OPS, 47 home runs, wins the MVP. You're like, okay, 2 out of 3 seasons, he's a superstar. Fourth season, COVID shortened, 60 games, etc., etc., etc. 788 OPS, the worst OPS of his career, on pace for just 35 home runs, so it would have been a 12 home run dip from the lead before, the lowest weighted runs created mark of his career. Now, in 4 seasons, we've seen him be elite twice, so I'm not. Once I see it twice, that gives me confidence. It's like you could do it once, okay. People could catch fire for 100 games and then kind of just ride it out for the other 60. We've seen him do it twice. So I'm not worried that Cody Bellinger isn't a very, very good baseball player. But I also think if you're just out there assuming that MVP level Cody Bellinger is a sure thing, to me, that seems foolish as I look back at his career so far. And I don't want this to be negative on Bellinger, but I guess my question is, what's your take on Bellinger moving forward? Like, where do you place him? If it's 2019 MVP Cody Bellinger, 2020 sort of good but not great Cody Bellinger, where do you have him? Closer to one, closer to the other, right in the middle? What do you think, Daniel?
Yeah. Yeah, you asked me who's the real Cody Bellinger, and I think that's like kind of a complex question, like
Yeah.
just because of, the volatility we've seen with his numbers. They go
Yeah,
up, they go down.
exactly.
But to me, that's what he is. He's a really talented player, arguably he's a top 5 talent player in the
Yeah.
sport. Like when you combine the power, the athleticism, the speed, he's got it all. Kind of like Mookie. He does it all. He does the little things. When he, even when he hits a ground ball to second base, he's always, hustling down the line and he gets down the line quick. So he's a great player, but he's just inconsistent. And
Yeah.
I don't I don't know if that's ever going to change. Like he's still really young and he could figure it out, but he has some major holes in his swing.
Yeah.
Like we see it, and that's why when you look at the postseason, that's why his numbers aren't anywhere comparable to his regular
Yeah.
season numbers. That's just because when you could game plan for a guy for a week-long series or a 7-game series, you know what his holes are and you could attack those holes. And that's what we've seen in October where guys are, pounding him up and in. And then they go to the breaking ball in the dirt and he can't really handle that either. So I think there's a formula to getting him out right now. He's obviously shown that he could break it at times. Like he's still a great player.
Yeah.
He's still put some great swings together in the postseason. But I think right now he's just inconsistent. I mean, he's got an incredibly high ceiling, as we saw in 2019 when he was the best player in baseball. But then we saw this year where he struggled pretty much the whole year. The
Yeah.
defense was still great for me. I like the way he plays center field. I know you said the metrics, don't
it's
exactly
bizarre.
line up with that, but we saw it. We saw it in the postseason, the great catches he made.
Yeah.
I'll take him as my center fielder any day of the week, and I'll take the inconsistencies, that come at the plate with that. He's still, even when he's not an MVP guy, he's still a really valuable player to me.
Yeah, I mean, the postseason one is a big one. So even this year, he was a 771 OPS. So it's not bad. I mean, you're hoping for more from a guy like Bellinger. But his OPS career in the playoffs is 630. Yeah. That's your on-base percentage plus your slugging percentage. So half of his 8 home runs came this year. Obviously, for my money, he had the biggest hit of the entire postseason, Game 7 NLCS home run with a bum shoulder, no less. So shout out to him. But let me ask you this, and I'll throw this out to people in the chat as well. Does Cody Bellinger finish in the top 3 for MVP voting at any point in his career from here on out?
Yeah, I think he will. I think we've seen him do it once.
Yeah, and he's young.
His rookie season, he was in the mix too. Like, I don't think he was top 3, but he had another, great season that year. So I think he's shown that he could put it together for a whole year if he gets locked in at the plate, or at least, half a year or 3/4 of a year. I feel like he faded a bit at the end of 2019, but he was so ridiculous in the first half that his overall numbers were just insane. But yeah, I definitely think he's got some bright years ahead of him. I think, he hasn't even entered his prime. If you're looking, at age, he's 25 or whatever. 25. So yeah, I definitely think I'll say he's got at least a couple more seasons where he'll be a top 3 MVP guy.
Okay. Keith C says yes. Nicole says yes. Keith C says next season is going to be a top 3 MVP finish. I
like it.
So Monster
he's an every other year guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're due. There you go. That's the point. That's the point. Monster 7649 says yes. Harpazo says Cody has ADD. Yeah, I mean, I just, I'm so fascinated by Bellinger, right? Because I think the thing that sort of makes me so intrigued by him is this year. He goes out and wins the MVP, and he comes back with that jacked up batting stance. Like, you had a 1.1 OPS last year. Like, Absolutely, Matt. And you went out and decided that you were going to tinker with it to the point that it was a disaster. Now, that kind of waned as the season went on. It felt like the stance got more and more normal. Although there were a bunch of
Yeah,
times where like, oh, he's figured it out. He's figured it out. And then it was like a 0 for 10
yeah,
slump. And it was like, okay, maybe not. But yeah, I mean, I am so intrigued. I mean, because the difference between a guy like Corey Seager is Corey Seager's been equally as inconsistent. The highs probably haven't been as high. I mean, nobody's high has been Cody Bellinger's 2019. But
right.
Seager, it's like, you can explain it, right? You can look at it and say he was injured. And every time Seager has been healthy, it's the same Seager. Bellinger, it's like there was no injury in 2020. There was no injury in 2018. And he was, again, I'm not saying he was bad. He was very good. He was just not superstar, elite, like MVP candidate perennially. And while Mookie Betts has been able to string together 4 or 5 of those seasons in a row, and the great players do. Again, Cody Bellinger's 25, but it is an interesting thing to just track with, because I'm with you. I think he puts it together. I think he's fully capable of, if he plays for the next 10 years, like saying he's not going to finish in the top 3 in the MVP voting at least once. Now, that's not to diminish how hard it is to finish in the top 3, but the talent is there. He plays defense. He hits. He's in LA. He's going to be on a contender. The biggest issue for him is probably Mookie Betts, honestly. I
Yeah,
think we saw a little bit of that this year is, are you really going to have 2 guys on the same team and be able to justify one of them winning it if the other guy's kind of in that top 5 to 6 thing? So we'll see. We got lots of chats in there saying they like the every other year thing. So we'll see. Wolfman says long swing, turns his hips too early, gets hot, and hits many home runs. I mean, and that is the thing. The home runs have been mostly consistent. Again, even in the playoffs, he had 4 home runs, which is significant. But it'll be interesting to see how Bellinger's career plays out. I think I'm most interested in how his career plays out. If I could figure out give me one look into the future of what does a guy career play out. I think of all the Dodgers, maybe it's Bellinger, because I could see it going either way. There have been guys that have had seasons like Cody Bellinger has had that 5 years down the road into a, $250 million contract looks like an albatross. I'm not saying it's him. I mean, even look at a guy like Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper had an elite MVP level year 1 year. And then for the most part, it's been good but not great. So I'm not trying to compare Bellinger to any of those guys except to say, we'll see.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that Bellinger does have going for him is just the fact that he's playing around with so many other great guys. It kind of takes pressure off him. Like, he doesn't have to be the guy. He could just be a guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we saw in the postseason last year. Like, he was batting 6th in the Dodgers lineup. And, just think about how crazy that is, to have a guy who was the MVP the year before with, like you said, an 1100 OPS, and
insane.
He's batting 6th in your lineup. Even when he's not hitting well, I'll take that guy 6th in my lineup any day of the week.
Absolutely. Well, that's Bellinger. We've got Betts. Now we get to left field, where there's some drama. There's some intrigue. There's some possibility. We've got free agent rumblings. Now, left field to me is fascinating because I think there's 3 names worth mentioning. AJ Pollock, who's signed for 3 more seasons. Joc Pederson, who's currently a free agent, longtime Dodger. And Chris Taylor, a guy that admittedly I almost forgot to include in this conversation because he doesn't have a single spot. We're doing infield, then we're doing outfield. It's like, when the heck do you talk about Chris Taylor? He doesn't really have a place. We're going to throw him here. And I'll give the overview as I see it. AJ Pollock, he's entering year 3 of a 5-year, $60 million contract. It's the biggest free agent contract that Andrew Friedman has given out as president of the Dodgers. That's not to say he hasn't tried to give out bigger ones, and obviously he's spent more money re-signing guys, but it's the biggest free agent one he's given out to date. You've got Chris Taylor, who's a utility guy, probably the most underrated, overlooked player on the Dodgers, and then Joc, again, a free agency that many people assume is gone. They tried trading him a year. And again, here's how I see each of these guys. AJ Pollock, $12 million a year. Struggled in his first season with the Dodgers, missed half of that season with injury, but this year tied for the team lead in home runs, 16 with Betts. Again, that's 47 home run pace. An OPS of 880. I mean, that's not good. Elite, but that is really, really good. Really good. Defensively, though, what's interesting is he grades out pretty poorly. And I say interestingly, not because I should say that lines up with, I think, the eye test. He doesn't look super agile. He doesn't look super athletic, but this is a guy who used to be an elite defensive center fielder, but he's grades out poorly there. The other thing that's worth mentioning about Pollock while we're there, he's been really bad in the playoffs. He had an OPS of 541 this year, 0 home runs. In 2 seasons with the Dodgers, he's 9 for 58 in the playoffs with 2 extra base hits, both of them doubles. Okay, so that's AJ. Then we've got Joc Pederson. Joc Pederson was below replacement level this year. He had a negative WAR of negative 0.1. But the 2 seasons prior to that, he had 5.8 wins above replacement over 2 seasons with 61 home runs. He was hitting about 250 and OPS around 850. Okay, in 2018, 2019, Joc Pederson was one of the top 30 outfielders in all of baseball, according to wins above replacement. Just let that sit for a second.
Yeah.
In 2018 and 2019, Joc Pederson was a top 30 outfielder in all of Major League Baseball, according to wins above replacement. He was tied for 10th in home runs with Mookie Betts, interestingly enough. Fielding, he's listed as above average when you look at his UZR, his ultimate zone rating. That's a little surprising to me. I mean, I think the Dodgers probably do a good job of getting him to stand in the right place. And I don't know, he doesn't look that part, but it's there. The last thing about Joc that's worth noting, this guy kills it in the postseason. 2 home runs, an OPS of 991 this year, 852 career postseason with 9 home runs. So there's Pederson. He's estimated by MLB Trade Rumors, 2-year deal around $18 million was their projection. Last guy, Chris Taylor, 842 OPS this season, just behind 2017 as a career high. He had 8 home runs, which would have been 23 home run pace. Again, would have been a career high. Basically had his best season to date everywhere you look. Remarkably consistent. 2019 was a down year, still above average, though, offensively. The rest, very, very good. Defensively, he's the best of this batch by a mile when it comes to Pollock and Pederson. He's above league average as a second baseman, as a third baseman, as a left fielder. He grades out really, really well. So again, we've seen the arm. I think he's the best option out there. Postseason, not great this year. 598 OPS, 1 home run, but career 761. Obviously, 2017 and 2018, he was really good. NLCS MVP in 2017. So those are sort of the options as I see it. And I'll let you go where you want. Do you want to talk platoons? Is one of these guys an everyday left fielder? You take the conversation wherever you want.
Yeah. Well, let me just start by saying, like, if those are your options, those are pretty good
Pretty
options.
good. Pretty
Like,
good.
especially when you consider, like, those are bottom of the order type guys for the Dodgers, and all of them would probably be middle of the order guys, and like half of the other teams in baseball. So
Yeah.
the fact that this is arguably, the Dodgers' weakest position, and those are the options,
Yeah.
means you're in pretty good shape. I'll start with Taylor, just because I feel like he's the most straightforward. I think if the Dodgers don't bring back Kike, then he becomes basically your super utility
Yeah.
guy. So I think he would see some time in left. I don't think he would ever become an everyday guy in left, just because he's too valuable at second base or as a backup shortstop to Corey Seager. He could play center. So, I mean, he'll be moving all over. So he'll see some time in left, but not a majority of it. I think as of right now, it's AJ Pollock's job. He proved this last year that he's an everyday player.
Yeah.
I've talked on this show that I think they should get a lefty option to kind of pair with him. Maybe not in like a 50-50 type share type thing, but I think we've seen in the postseason with AJ Pollock the last couple years is he really struggles against the power righties, which basically is almost every pitcher you face in the postseason.
Yeah.
So to me, he's fine playing every day or close to every day in the regular season. You want to give him his rest just because of his injury history, and he's on the wrong side of 30. But I think he could more or less be your everyday left fielder in the regular season, and then in the postseason, you probably have to find a lefty that could play against the righties, because I feel like we've seen him struggle enough that I'm not putting him in the lineup if Steven Strasburg's on the mound or Max Scherzer. So that's what leaves me with Joc, and I've kind of been one of the only people pushing the Dodgers to re-sign him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they will. I doubt it if I had to guess, but with this offseason, there's so much uncertainty. We don't know what teams are spending, if any. I feel like there's hardly any teams that are going to be willing to give Joc Pederson a multi-year type deal. So maybe it's kind of similar. There was a report about Kike that he's looking for a 1-year deal. So maybe Joc is looking for a 1-year deal, and he could have, another great season with the Dodgers, another great postseason, win another ring, and then he could hit free agency again next winter when maybe more teams are willing to spend if the pandemic's, behind us. So to me, I would be trying to re-sign Joc Pederson if it's a 1-year, $8 million type deal, 1 year, nine
Yeah.
million. I wouldn't be, in the business of overpaying for him just because they have other options that could fill that role.
Yeah.
We had one of the commenters said Gavin Lux. I'm sure we'll get into that as well. That could potentially be an option. He's a left-handed bat, so
Yeah.
they do have options. But I would look to re-sign Joc if they can on a 1-year deal.
Now, we posted a video today. There were reports that Rob Manfred has told Major League Baseball teams to plan as if there will be no designated hitter in 2020. Right. There's lots of people that think that's posturing and that eventually we'll get there, most people agree there will be the DH in 2021 and moving forward. Does that impact your decision? To me, Joc Pederson is the guy that would be most impacted by the designated hitter decision. To you, does the idea of re-signing Joc hinge at all on the belief that there would be a designated hitter?
I definitely think it plays into it, and I also think it's ridiculous that MLB hasn't made a decision on this yet.
Free agency has already started. How are teams supposed to sign guys?
Putting their rosters together, and they don't know if they need to fill 8 or 9 spots. That's absolutely insane. I couldn't imagine if I was a free agent and I was mainly a DH, I'd be like, hello, can we make a decision on this? This impacts whether 15 teams could be interested or 30. That's a huge difference. But I think, like you said, I think it is a bit of posturing, and I think ultimately we get the DH just because it would be kind of ridiculous to not have it this year and then get it back next year after the new CBA is agreed upon, which I feel like is what everyone is speculating is that when the new CBA comes, the DH will be here to stay. So why get rid of it for 1 year at this point? So I think there will be a DH. I'm hoping there will be, because it's a huge advantage for the Dodgers just getting to rest all their regular guys as DH, once or twice a week. But I think Joc Pederson is probably the guy who's impacted most by that. Maybe Justin Turner a little bit too.
Turner's the other guy,
because obviously that gives the Dodgers an extra lineup spot if there is a DH, and that means that both Joc and Pollock could be in the lineup, and it's not just a strict platoon. Because I don't know if Joc would be on board with just a full-time platoon. He plays half the time.
Yeah.
But if it's a 1-year deal, I don't think he'd want to head into free agency basically right where he is now. So I guess we'll see. I don't know when that decision's coming, but yeah, I definitely think it impacts those guys.
The platoon part of that to me is going back to the left field and how this plays out. The platoon piece is interesting to me for a lot of reasons. First, they didn't pay AJ Pollock $60 million to be a platoon guy. Now, we're year 3, so you adjust. Just because you paid him $60 million 3 years ago doesn't mean you're already locked in. So that doesn't mean you have to make another bad decision if you think you made a mistake. To your point, AJ Pollock played really well. 880 OPS, led the team in home runs. I think he's capable of it. And even if you look at his splits, right? So the idea of a platoon is obviously you get some guys against righties, some against lefties. Remembering that left-handed pitching, going on numbers, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of the time you're playing left-handed pitching. So, 2/3 of the time or more, we're talking about facing right-handed pitching. Joc Pederson of the 3 is the best against right-handed pitching. He hits 849 against, or his OPS is 849 against right-handed pitching. What's interesting is Chris Taylor is 820. So Chris Taylor's right there with him. I mean, not a whole lot behind. Obviously, the power is much less, but he gets you a lot more on base, while Joc's giving you slugging. AJ Pollock 788. So really respectable. I mean, 788 is good.
Yeah,
it's not great, but it's not bad. Against left-handed pitching, Pollock's the best. 857 OPS. Chris Taylor around 800. Joc Pederson 576. Okay, so the only real liability here is Joc can't face left-handed pitching. Either of the other two could play every day. So for me, what's interesting is I actually think Chris Taylor can replace much of what Joc offers, and he's a lot better defensively. So I guess what I would say is AJ Pollock would be my everyday left fielder, and Chris Taylor would be the guy that bounces around, but gets plenty of time in left field because I know he's the best defensive option out there, and he can get me good at bats against right-handed pitching. Even though I trust Pollock in that spot, I think he's there. So that would be my argument against, hey, take the $9 million that you would use to spend on Joc Pederson and go spend it on the bullpen. There are rumors today the Dodgers are kicking the tires on DJ LeMahieu. That's a guy I've mentioned as part of my offseason plan I'd love to have. But I would personally allocate those resources elsewhere. Now, the flip side, if I was going to make the argument for Joc Pederson, it's really, really simple. The postseason. He's the postseason. the Dodgers have consistently built teams to win in the postseason. They don't care about the regular season in the sense that they know they're going to make it. Like they know they're going to win the NL West. Now, obviously the Padres are up and coming, so maybe they have to take the regular season a little more seriously, but they know they're going to be in the playoffs. I mean, it would be an abject failure if they did not. Joc Pederson absolutely crushes. The moment is never too big to him, and all that. And not to mention, he kind of fits. I mean, like you said, he is, if you're going to put a platoon out there, he's the perfect guy. It leaves Taylor to float around a little bit. So if you gave me the option of Kike Hernandez and giving Chris Taylor a lot more playing time in left field versus re-signing Joc, I might lean that way because I like Kike's defense a little bit more. Second base, probably a little bit more of a question mark for the Dodgers, which obviously Kike would give some protection there. So there's a lot of pieces to that. One other thing, I think it was someone in the chat, DJ Jesse mentioned David Dahl. There are free agent options out there. Are there any left fielders? I mean, they've got $12 million committed to Pollock. So if they go get anyone, at most it's going to be a platoon player, if not less. Free agency, any prospects, younger guys on the team that you like that maybe should be a part of this? I mean, Gavin Lux is a name that maybe deserves to be mentioned here.
Yeah. I don't know about any free agents. I don't know if the Dodgers are going to be spending in free agency. I feel like it's going to be to address other needs,
or Joc,
like the pen or even a starter. I don't think they look at left field as an area of need.
No.
Just because they got plenty of options. But internally, I think Gavin Lux, we could potentially see him get some time out there, especially. I guess it depends on how good his infield defense is. We saw him struggle a bit this past year, and if he's not cutting it at second base, you could throw him out there in left field. He's an athlete. He could probably learn it pretty easily. I'm sure he's played there at some point in his life. So I'd be looking to maybe get Gavin Lux some time out there. And the other name is Edwin Rios. He personally wouldn't be the one playing left field, but I feel like you could do some maneuvering. Like if you put Rios at first and you move Muncy over to second and then Taylor in left or whatever, or Lux in left, I feel like he would be the beneficiary of that extra playing time. Just because he's a lefty, so he hits righties well. And if you look at his numbers, he is absolutely deserving of some more at bats. I guess he's another guy that it'll really depend on the DH. But I would be looking to get him in the lineup as much as possible against righties. So there's another potential solution. I know there's some other prospects coming up like Zach Rex and DJ Peters and those guys that are outfielders. Luke Raley's another one. So maybe we see them at some point. And Matt Beatty is obviously still here as well. So there's no shortness of options. But I mean, it's, for me at least, Pollock's going to be seeing a lot of time there in the regular season at least.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, it's worth noting Pollock's health history is not perfect. So while you could basically pencil him in for a full season this year, that was the first time in a while. It's not to say he'll be injured all the time, but to just go into a season saying, well, A.J. Pollock's going to be our everyday guy and we'll take one of our utility guys and throw him in as backup is risky. That's where I think Joc Pederson offers you a little bit of protection. The flip side is, again, how big is the drop-off between Joc Pederson and the best of the bunch that we just mentioned, between Rex and, Beatty and Rios and all those rest of those guys, because for me, I think for Lux, the only way he plays left field, I think, is if they just decide that his second base defensive work is untenable. I think we're a long way from that. Maybe I'm being naive. I mean, I know there was a lot of concern by all accounts, but that's also by people. We didn't get to see him at the training site. So, we didn't get to we saw a teeny bit. So I'd like to think that he'll be able to figure it out, but maybe I'm being optimistic. Maybe I'm being naive. But yeah, I mean, left field will be interesting. I think it sounds like we're both in agreement that AJ Pollock as the everyday guy is where we would start. You are probably more in favor of Joc Pederson coming back as a free agent than I am. And then Chris Taylor. I mean, again, to me, I guess when I was doing my research for this piece, I was reminded how good Chris Taylor is. And he's a guy, by the way, that hits lefties and righties just about dead even, which is fascinating to me. I mean, his OPS, there are like no splits. It's like 110 WRC against lefties and 111 against righties. And those numbers bump up a little bit if you're just looking at 2017 to 2020, which probably we should be doing. So I think Chris Taylor's a winner. And I think if you could get him more playing time, again, if there's no DH, then you're going to need to find spots for him in the lineup, where you can't just say, hey, Corey Seager, take a day off, you'll DH. It's like taking Corey Seager a day off would mean Corey Seager out of the lineup. So it'll be interesting. There's lots of stuff talk in the chat. I mean, obviously, if Kike Hernandez could play left field too, if he comes back, so that could be an option out there. Estevan Hernandez says we need Joc back. People are pointing out, Lux, Rios, Beatty. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of options out there. There's lots of talk about Kenley Jansen getting traded. So if you could find somebody that wants that contract, I don't know how that got into the outfield conversation, but more power to you. Somebody asked, did Matt Beatty ever play the outfield? I mean, I think he's primarily a first baseman, but they have had him out in the outfield before.
He's played a little left.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to kind of close my thoughts on the outfield, I feel like as of now, unless if they re-sign Joc or if they bring in another outfielder, that changes some things. And also, I think left field and second base are kind of tied to each other for the Dodgers. So if they bring in a second baseman, that would change some things as well. But I think as of right now, it's essentially between Pollock, Lux, and Taylor. That's 3 guys for 2 positions.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
You could have each of them essentially playing 66% of the time, and Taylor will play more at other positions as well. So I think that would be enough playing time for everyone where they could get some rest. And obviously, we're going to have to wait and see what Gavin Lux is. Like, we don't know if he's an everyday guy yet. We don't know if he's a platoon guy. So I feel like that stuff kind of plays itself out. But the Dodgers, they definitely got options. 3 guys for 2 spots.
Yeah, and you could probably toss Rios into the conversation, not as a second baseman or as a left fielder, but as you pointed out, you could move Muncy to second base. You could move, Turner to first and Rios at third, etc. That kind of thing. But yeah, and I mean, I think if you got Andrew Friedman alone and said, all right, what's the dream scenario? He says, AJ Pollock's my everyday left fielder. Gavin Lux is my everyday second baseman. And Chris Taylor, is playing 120 games a year, just taking turns. One day he's at second, the next day he's at short, the next day he's at third, the next day he's at left, and then you just rotate. He plays 4 times a week kind of thing. I would imagine that's the dream scenario, and then you get some random at-bats for some of these other guys. But obviously, can A.J. Pollock's health hold up? That's a major question. Can Gavin Lux figure it out enough? That's a major question. You and I have talked on the show before. We're both confident. So we'll see with that. So that's the Dodger outfield. I mean, again, these are all good problems to have. The Dodgers have unbelievable depth, unbelievable talent, and even if they lose a guy like Joc Pederson, there's a reason they were willing to trade him at the beginning of last year. It's not because they didn't value him. It's because they feel good about the guys coming in behind him. So keep that in mind. Well, let's close out. We got about 20 minutes left on the show. Let's close out the time with some mailbag questions. If you've got questions, hit them up. Hit us up in the chat, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope. We appreciate you joining us. We got a huge crowd tonight. So thank you for joining us wherever you're at. But we'll start with one that's not necessarily a mailbag question, but one I wanted to get your thoughts on. If there's been big Dodger news this offseason, it's the trade that they made last week for Corey Knebel. Corey Knebel of the Milwaukee Brewers, he was going to be non-tendered. The Dodgers traded for him, tendered him a contract, estimated he'll make around $5 million in arbitration. The headline on him is really simple. 2017, one of the best seasons from a relief pitcher we've seen. Third in ERA in all of baseball, 1.78. He was 4th in FIP, 4th in saves. He had the highest strikeouts per 9 in all of baseball by 2. So he's striking out almost 15 guys per 9 innings, and that nobody else was above 13. He had the best strand rate, 92% left on base, the highest strikeout percentage, 41%. 2018, similar numbers. Stuff ticked down a little bit, but still good. 2019, Tommy John comes back in 2020, 13 innings pitched, hamstring injury, 6.08 ERA, fastball velocity down from 97 to 94. He's 29 years old. Daniel, what are your thoughts as you've processed the Corey Knebel trade in the last couple of days?
Yeah. Like you said, that 2017 season was absolutely incredible. I had him in our fantasy league, so I watched him pitch a lot, and he was lights out that year. I actually used him as one of my keepers going into 2018. It didn't quite work out as I know, but he's still all right the next year. But no, he was one of the best relief pitchers in baseball that year. And like you said, he's had the Tommy John surgery since, so he's still got a lot of work to do to get back to that point. But I like this trade a lot.
Yeah.
The Dodgers didn't give up anything other than they're paying his salary and what was it, like cash or
player to be named later or cash. But I think the what I heard was probably cash.
Yeah, so they basically gave up nothing, and I forgot who, but I saw someone tweet like, if Andrew Friedman's calling like to acquire one of your relievers, like you should probably think about
you should probably just pay him.
Yeah, like I mean, we've seen the Dodgers do this with plenty of guys, right? Like Brandon Morrow, Blake Treinen this past year. Like if you're a once highly touted, really great reliever that's kind of going through a rough stretch of your
Yeah.
career, the best place for you to go is the Dodgers because they'll get you right back on track. And we've heard Andrew Friedman talk about how they want different looks out of the bullpen. They had a lot of sinker guys this past year, and so that's what Knebel is. He's a different look. He throws a four-seam fastball. I mean, if he could get back to what he was pre-surgery, that was a 99, 98 mile an hour fastball. So
Yeah.
really high velocity. He likes throwing it high, and he's got a really good breaking ball, which that's not a whole lot of that in the Dodgers bullpen. It's mainly, two seamers and sliders or whatever. So it's a different look. It's a low risk, high reward type
Yeah.
of deal. I'm not expecting him to come in and be the closer by any means, even though he does have a past history as a closer and had a lot of success doing it. So it could end up being an option if he gets right. But we'll just have to wait and see what he is. But I like the move a lot. I think that's a good start to hopefully some more moves to come.
Yeah, I mean, and I said basically, when we were breaking the news and reacting to it. We didn't break the news. We were reacting to the news in real time, I should say. I'll clarify that. We're not taking credit for anything here, okay? Is if I'm the Dodgers, the types of moves that I want to make are high upside moves. Like the Dodgers don't need to go find the guy for $1.5 million who's going to be a great seventh inning guy. We've got about 12 of those and another 6 probably sitting in AAA, like just dying to be playing. What the Dodgers need are elite arms. The Dodgers saw Knebel and they said, we know this guy has upside as that. He's 29. We're not talking about a guy who's 34. Tommy John surgery nowadays is like easy to recover from, in a lot of ways. And you can see why Milwaukee wanted to give up on him. $5 million to a small market team after the economic impact that we're in the midst of.
Yeah.
For a team where they have 2 already unbelievably elite relievers, to pay $5 million for your third best reliever at best, you can't do that if you're Milwaukee. And so getting rid of him makes a ton of sense. They were able to get a little bit of value. So that makes a little sense. So I liked it just because these are the moves the Dodgers should be making. I think the upside is there. And I don't want to overreact, but I think you could make the argument that there's a good chance he's the best reliever the Dodgers have in their bullpen in a few months. And that kind of dovetails into the second conversation I wanted to have. Other news that kind of broke in Los Angeles this week, which is Kenley Jansen. In the LA Times on Friday, Dave Roberts quoted as saying, quote, "The best case scenario is Kenley is our closer, but that is solely dependent on him." This is Dave Roberts saying that. This is Dave Roberts saying that about the closer from last year on a team that was 9th in baseball in blown saves. In 2020, Jansen was good. 3.3 ERA, strikeouts per 9 up from 2018, went up in 2019, went up again in 2020. His FIP went down in 2019, down again in 2020. But the velocity, 94 to 90.9. For me, I think Jansen's a really good reliever. He just isn't elite, and he shouldn't be the closer. I think at least a guy like Knebel has the upside to be there. I know a lot of people like Gratterall, Urias, those types of names, but if there's one hole in the Dodgers roster right now, it's what reliever do you trust most? And I don't think there's a good answer to that.
Yeah. I don't know about Kenley as the closer. I mean, in Robert's defense, like, yes, best case scenario is Kenley Jansen returns to old Kenley Jansen, has a 1.5 ERA and saves 40 games. Yes, that would be great. But I don't think it's realistic to expect that to even be possible at this stage of his career. So I think what we're heading towards is that we're going to start the year with Kenley as the closer. He's going to get another chance. We saw in the postseason that he basically was the closer the whole time until he blew a couple games and they had to go to some other guys. But I think where we're headed to is Kenley as a closer to start the year, and it's going to be up to him whether, like Robert said, it's going to be up to him whether he keeps that job or whether he implodes again. I'm not too concerned about the regular season, to be honest. Like, if Kenley is doing what he did in the regular season last year, like, that's fine for me as a closer. Like, that's winning you enough games to win the division. He'll blow one every now and then. He's going to make us nervous every night, which I'm not looking forward to. But in the regular season, it doesn't matter a whole lot. So for me, it's all about the postseason, and we can't really talk about the Dodgers postseason bullpen now because that's not really something you talk about until like a week before it's happening, just because you never know what's going to happen. Like, with A, injuries, and B, like a guy could be great the whole year and then like he has a bad 2 week stretch right before the
Totally.
postseason and that you can't trust him anymore. So we're just gonna have to wait and see. But ideally they bring in another arm in addition to Knebel that could kind of compete for that closers role. I don't know if it's bringing back Trinan or a Liam Hendricks or a Brad Hand,
Yeah.
but I'm hoping they bring in someone that could at least compete for spots or for looks in that ninth inning.
Yeah, I mean, I said this in the Jansen thing. I think the best thing the Dodgers could do is actually almost, I don't want to say the opposite of what you just said. I don't want any competition. Like, I think what you need to do is go get a guy that eliminates all competition. Go get a guy that makes it so abundantly clear that Kenley Jansen is not the closer anymore, that it's not even up for debate. I think the issue with a guy like Knebel, if he's the best thing you bring in, a guy like Gratterall, whoever, is Kenley Jansen still looks around the room and says, I'm the best. And maybe he's going to do that no matter what. But if you bring Liam Hendricks in, if you bring a Josh Hader in via trade, Kenley Jansen, like at some point there is an end to his pride that has to be able to look at a Liam Hendricks and say, well, okay, he's better than me. That's my hope for the Dodgers because that's what has to happen. Now, the flip side of all this, Kenley's got one more year on his contract. DJ Jesse asked an interesting question that I'm going to pass along to you, Daniel. Kenley Jansen has one more year on his contract. Do you think Kenley Jansen retires as a Dodger?
I'm gonna say no. I don't know. We'll see what he looks like this season because obviously you can't determine his next contract until you see how he looks this season. But I just don't see how he lasts. Like I don't think he's going to be a Dodger beyond this next season. To be honest, even if he has a bad year, for me it's a no-brainer that he's gone.
Oh yeah.
But I feel like regardless, like some team is going to find value in what he does. I mean, his numbers still are not that bad.
Yeah.
So unless you're like us and Dodger fans and everyone in our chat right now that watches it night in and night out, I feel like the reputation of Jansen around baseball is not the same as we all have for him.
Probably
just
true.
Because when you don't watch him every night and then you look at like the overall numbers, like the numbers are still not bad, right? So they don't know what it took to go through to get to those numbers and getting 2 or 3 guys on base every outing and getting out of a jam or blowing one every now and then. Like they don't necessarily know. So I feel like there's a team out there that would be willing to bring in Jansen. I mean, he's still a big name. You would maybe sell some tickets if you're in a smaller market. So for me, I think this will be Kenley's last season in Dodger uniform. And hey, he's had a great career. Like I know we like to pick on him a bit now, but if you look at some of the years he's had some amazing years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was, I think I said in the video, like he was the best or the second best reliever in baseball over a 5-year stretch. It was him and Aroldis Chapman that for like 4 or 5 years were head and shoulders above everybody else. I mean, he put together one of the best relief pitcher seasons ever. I think it was like the 3rd best like rated relief pitcher season ever a few years ago. So credit to him. But yeah, I think to me, the question is, does he play baseball beyond this year? I think the writing seems to be on the wall. I mean, I'm not trying to read too many into this or make waves, but I think Jansen is a leader in the clubhouse, but in his own unique kind of way. I think there have been moments that have seemed tense with Jansen. The types of moments you don't see with Justin Turner, you don't see with Clayton Kershaw. When he's staring down the dugout after Game 5 of the NLCS and then afterwards saying no big deal. Dave Roberts, I remember him on Joe Davis and Oral Hershiser's podcast, basically saying when he got there, he kind of had to go chest to chest with Jansen and sort of assert himself because Jansen wasn't necessarily respecting him or listening to him. Now they kind of worked that out, but I think Roberts has clearly struggled to be able to define a role for Kenley Jansen that he's happy about. So I can't see that relationship lasting because I don't think Jansen will stick around in LA and not be the closer. And I think by the end of this year, he will officially and clearly not be the closer. I'm curious, will he go somewhere else and sign somewhere else, or will he just decide, hey, you know what, I had a good run in LA and I'm going to hang it up? Does he? But he does seem, maybe he wants to go prove that he can still do it. I don't know. We have some people in the chat saying he's going to get traded. I hate to break this to you. He's making $20 million this season. There is not a team on the planet that is trading for that contract. One guy said we should trade Pollock, Joe Kelly, and Jansen. You don't get to just package all the contracts you don't want and just give them away. I mean, nobody wants the 3 years, $36 million left on Pollock's contract. Definitely nobody wants whatever the $8 million Joe Kelly is making. So, I mean, they're here. Just embrace it. Accept Joe Kelly for what he is. He's an okay reliever. Are they overpaying for him? freaking lutely, but he's here. Like, he's not going anywhere. I hate to break that to you.
Yeah. Let me just say, though, as far as getting rid of all your bad contracts, the Dodgers did do that once in that deal with the Reds where they unloaded
Yeah,
Kemp and Puig and Wood.
Whoa. Don't say bad things about Puig, Daniel.
No, I'm
Not
not
a
saying
bad contract. There was no such thing as a bad contract with Yasiel. Every Yasiel
Yeah.
Puig contract is a good contract.
Yes, and that is why we got Josiah Gray and Jeter Downs in return. So
Yeah,
thank you.
because of Puig, exactly.
Yes.
Everybody, the Reds recognized what they were getting.
Yeah, but what I was gonna say is the difference in that deal is all those guys were in the last year of their contract.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're shipping out 3 years of Pollock and 2 years of Kelly anytime soon.
Nope.
And Kenley, I don't see it happening for the money, but I just don't see them trading a guy like that. I think they'll just ride out this last year and then wish him the best.
The only way I could see it is if the first half of the year goes so bad, and I don't even mean from a performance perspective, but from like he gets demoted from closer and just goes ballistic, just goes public and is frustrated and demands to be traded. I mean, that's the only way I could see it. And again, there's probably a team out there that would like Kenley Jansen, and the Dodgers would have to get to a place where they're basically willing to eat, $10 million not to have him pitch here. It's just hard to say. So, if you've got any more questions, please throw those in the chat. Again, we've got a bunch of people on YouTube, some folks on Periscope and Facebook as well. But yeah, I mean, Derek Wing says, Kenley can serve well in middle relief. I'm with you. I think Kenley Jansen, I'll clarify, I think he's a really good pitcher still. He's just not an elite closer. And if you're the Dodgers and you have World Series aspirations, that's what you need. Adrian Lopez asked, this can be a quick one. Did Dave Roberts redeem himself this year and solidify himself as a top manager? I don't think he's a top manager. Let me repeat. It will be hard for me ever to get over what he did to Clayton Kershaw in 2019. I will say that. The flip side is, I think we were both really fair with him. We were critical all throughout the season, and we both looked back at the end of the postseason and said, you know what? Dave Roberts did a really good job. Were there some bad decisions with Pedro Baez in Game 4 of the World Series? Absolutely. Were there other small moments? We both thought he outmanaged the Braves manager. We both thought he outmanaged the Rays manager. So I think Dave Roberts is a really good manager. I don't think he's perfect. I don't know if the perfect manager existed. I think we know what Dave Roberts' flaws are. I think those are massive problem flaws. Like, his thing is not knowing how to manage a bullpen, which is pretty much what determines who wins the World Series, is how well you can manage your bullpen. So for you, has Dave Roberts redeemed himself? Has he solidified himself as an elite manager?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you on this. I think he's an elite manager in everything other than managing a bullpen. Like, he does a great job of managing the clubhouse, and managing guys who maybe should be getting more playing time than they are getting. He gets them to buy in. He's really good at that. He's really positive. Like, he keeps guys upbeat, which I think helped them overcome, the 3-1 deficit in the NLCS. But I think just because they won the World Series doesn't take away from his deficiencies. We still know, like, we know he's not going to make all the right decisions when it comes to managing his bullpen. And I also think that results aren't necessarily indicative of whether he made the right decision. Like, just because he puts a guy in and they get everyone out doesn't mean it was the right decision. And just because he puts a guy in and they get rocked doesn't mean it was the wrong decision, right? Like, it's about the process. And for me, he still made a fair amount of mistakes this past postseason, but the players picked him up. And at the end of the day, like, that's what baseball is, right? Like, so to me, I don't think Dave Roberts is going anywhere for a very long time, especially now that he won it all. Like, he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. So for me, I'm just not going to sit here and have these conversations every week next year. Like, just because, like, I'm not going to sit there and say or listen to people saying fire Dave Roberts when we just literally all of us know it's just not happening. So Dave Roberts, he is what he is. He's a good manager. He's fine with me, and he's not going anywhere. So if you don't like him, tough luck.
Yeah, Matt Anderson says he's a great coach, but not a great manager. I think I have him the opposite. I think he's a great manager, but not a great coach. I think we underrate his ability to control egos and get everybody in the same direction. And I've said it before. I think he's now a World Series winning manager. I think anybody who walks in the door of the Dodgers, whether it's a prospect or a free agent, knows that he is in charge. Nobody will ever think they're bigger than him. If you bring in a new guy, you always risk screwing that up. So Yeah, Antonio asks, where do I find merch? We have no merch at the moment, but we're hopefully going to have some stuff soon. So stay tuned for that. We appreciate the question. We're working on some stuff. So that's good. Monster7649 has mentioned this. Will Smith at third base and Ruiz at catcher. Any legs to you? I mean, Will Smith's one of the best catchers in baseball. I just don't see them moving him out of there. I get the desire to get Keber Ruiz some at bats. I just don't see Smith moving from behind the plate.
Yeah, I don't see that. Maybe they would do that like for a game or every now and then. I don't think that would ever be a permanent type deal.
Yeah.
I think Smith has too much valuable behind the plate. Like as great of a hitter as he is, part of that is because he's a catcher, right?
Yeah.
Like if he was putting up his numbers at third base, yes, they're still great numbers, obviously, but that's more comparable with some other third basemen in the league. So I think Will Smith is a catcher, and I don't know if Ruiz is really ready to take on any sort of big league role yet. I still think he probably needs one more season in the minors just because he didn't get that this past year. So maybe that's a topic that we could have a year from now.
Yeah, absolutely. Harpazzo points out, so Jader Downs, who we mentioned, he was part of the trade for Mookie Betts that went to Boston. So absolutely. But yeah, so we'll see. Let's see. Any other questions we've got in here? I mean, one thing we can mention real quick is the rumor that got mentioned today. I think it was Jeff Passan that pointed out the Dodgers are interested in DJ LeMahieu. Again, we've talked a little bit about, I am a fan, your reaction to I mean, obviously you'd have to pay up for LeMahieu. We're talking big money, probably $20-ish million a year, probably for 4-ish years. Obviously he also comes with a draft pick that would be given up. I think it wouldn't necessarily be their first pick, but maybe their second, something like that. But a high draft pick, which we know the Dodgers are very protective of. So is that a deal breaker for you, or if the Dodgers? I mean, like, would you be an advocate for DJ LeMahieu?
I would absolutely be an advocate for DJ LeMahieu. He was a guy that I really wanted 2 years ago. They ended up signing Pollock instead, which he's not bad, but he definitely hasn't produced at the level that DJ LeMahieu has the last couple years. I don't think the Dodgers are in the business of getting in a bidding war for DJ LeMahieu. Like, he's not that type of player for me. But like you said, if it was like something like a, 20 million a year for 3 or 4 years, I would definitely consider it. Ultimately, I think he's probably going back to the Yankees.
Yeah.
And
they need him.
If he doesn't, that means someone really overpaid him. But I would like DJ LeMahieu, but I'm not going to sit here and get my hopes up that it's happening.
I mean, I think it's one of those things as a Dodger fan at this point, you just learn the Dodgers are going to be mentioned in every rumor for a couple of reasons. Andrew Friedman does his due diligence. He knows he can afford to do things, so he's going to kick the tires. He's going to ask questions. He's going to, and see what happens. I think they did the same thing with Bryce Harper a few years ago. Were they ever very seriously interested? Probably not, but it got down where it dragged on and dragged on and dragged on, and the reports were that the Dodgers essentially made him like a 1-year, $40 million offer or something, because it gets to a point where he's like, hell, I'll do this. I mean, like, I won't give you the $300 million, but if you want 140, why not? Let's do it. So I think that's part of it. I think the second thing is, if you're DJ LeMahieu's agent, you want everybody to think they're bidding against the Dodgers. Same goes for trades. Every GM wants you to think that the Dodgers are the team you're competing against. So we just have to sort of read through. I mean, all that to say, DJ LeMahieu's really good, and he plays a position in third base and even second base that the Dodgers have a massive hole in. So I think there's probably more than just fake smoke going on here. I think there probably is some truth to it. But to your point, are the Dodgers really going to go out and outbid a team like the Yankees while also having to give up a draft pick, which the Yankees do not? Obviously, they'd be giving up a draft pick in a sense by not letting him walk, but you get the idea. So, it's interesting. I mean, Matt Anderson asks, can you imagine if we got Harper instead of Betts? I mean, there's a lot of those. If they sign Garrett Cole, do they still go out and trade for Mookie Betts? Maybe, but probably not, because I can't imagine they wanted to sign $700 million worth of contracts like that. So definitely very interesting there. So, hey, I see a bunch more questions in there. Some Alex Nibiru. I haven't done my digging on some of these guys coming over from Japan, coming over from the NPB and the KBO. So stay tuned. I'll have to get back to you on that. I did watch the KBO. I mean, I'm into KBO. But you have any info on some of the guys coming over, Daniel?
No, all I was gonna say is we haven't done our digging, but I guarantee you Andrew Friedman has. we've seen the Dodgers love bringing over, Asian players. They did it with Maeda, Ryu, so
Yeah.
they were linked to Otani. So yeah, if there's a guy coming over from Japan or Korea that could have some value, you bet the Dodgers will be in on it.
Yeah, and I mean, and to be fair, there are like a handful of guys. I think there were like 3 guys that were all posted in Japan. I know a couple of the top players in Korea have also been posted. So one of the guys, I can't remember who, and maybe this is who you're referring to. It's a shortstop that many people think is like 19, maybe 19 or 20 years old. Who people are basically saying this guy would be a top 100 prospect the day that he showed up. So we'll see what happens there, but no info for you. So hey, we appreciate you guys joining us tonight. It's been hour mark, so we're gonna let you go. Again, this has been Dodger Heads. That's Daniel Starkin. I'm Jeff Spiegel. You can see where to find us on Twitter at @DStarkin, over there at Jeff Spiegel. Here, we would love to have you follow us, interact with us there. Of course, the biggest thing, make sure you're subscribed to Dodger Blue 1958 on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. YouTube's the big one. I mean, we're hopeful winter meetings this week. Maybe there's some breaking news, some big rumors. But we're trying to put out regular videos, at least one a day, Monday through Friday, reacting to those things in real time. So again, today they announced that the teams have been told not to plan for the DH. We had a video come out. We broke down the Corey Knebel trade as soon as it happened. We broke down the Dave Roberts, Kenley Jansen quote. I've got a video coming out this week about, is Julio Urias the closer of the future for the Dodgers? So that should be a good one as well. But we appreciate you guys joining us. Again, every Monday night we'll be here, whether it's me and Daniel or me and Matt, 9 p.m., right on the heels of Trevor Lane over at Lakers Nation, which is a sister site of ours. So we appreciate you joining us. Check out DodgerBlue.com for all the latest, and enjoy the rest of your night. Enjoy the week.